You're in the water loop.
Waterloop is made possible in part by grants from Spring Point Partners and the Walton Family Foundation. Hi, this is Travis with Waterloop. Water conservation is very important to me, and I bet it is to all of you. That's why I use High Sierra shower heads in my house, and I'm so happy to have them as a supporter of this podcast. High Sierra carries the EPA WaterSense label for efficiency and uses 40% less water than conventional low-flow shower heads. 40%. The model I have uses just 1.5 gallons per minute. And because of their unique nozzle design, it's patented. Nobody else has it. It maximizes efficiency of water and energy use, but doesn't sacrifice on performance. You still get a powerful shower. Use promo code LOOP20 for 20% off at highsierrashowerheads.com.
Waterloop.
The Waterloop podcast is sponsored by Flume. It's the perfect device for tracking your home's water use in real time on your smartphone. It's so easy to use. You just attach a small device to your water meter using a band, the same way you put a watch on your wrist. Then you connect to Wi-Fi, you download the app, and you're up and running. It's as simple as that. You don't need a plumber. You don't need to cut into any of your pipes or water lines. Very easy to set up. Then you can set water budgets, how much you want to use each day or week. It'll keep track of that. It'll tell you what's going on in your house with water use minute by minute. It'll send alerts to you if there's excessive water use or if it suspects a leak. In fact, when I installed Flume at my house, it told me almost right away about a leak. I was losing 1 gallon of water every 6 minutes. I'm honestly not sure when I would have found that without Flume. You can use promo code WATERLOOP for 10% off at flumewater.com.
You're in the water loop.
Welcome to Waterloop. This is Travis. Happy for this episode to be joined by 3 guests to talk about community outreach, environmental justice, water issues on the ground, and the intersection of all of those, especially through Toledo, Ohio. I have Alexis Smith, Community Program and Technology Associate with Freshwater Future. Alexis, glad you could be on.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Sure. And I have Alicia Smith, Director of Community Programming and Associate Director of Policy for Freshwater Future. Hi, Alicia. And I have Ramon Perez, Community Organizer for the Junction Coalition. Ramon, happy to have you on as well.
You got it, brother. Glad to be on.
So I know we're going to talk a lot about Toledo, Ohio, but I think a lot of the issues that we're going to talk about are things that are happening in communities around the Great Lakes and around the country, really. But let's talk about Toledo. What are some of the water and environmental justice challenges for the people in Toledo?
What we see mostly right now is the contamination of harmful algal blooms, and that has actually introduced more issues as we talk about environmental. So when CAFOS factories, these large farming factories, that upstream community has all of that runoff and manure contaminates Lake Erie, which is and we live right in that eastern that Lake Erie basin. That comes downstream to Toledo, and we have to filter out so much of that harmful contamination, and part of that drives up cost. And then who's paying for that? Well, our communities are paying for that. The ratepayers, or customers, as the utilities refer to them, in areas that are very hardly impacted. They can't afford to have rates skyrocket. And that's what we're seeing. So from the contamination, which in 2014 caused the water to be completely undrinkable, and that now moving into making rates unaffordable, those are 2 of those environmental justice issues that we see. Another one is the just aging infrastructure that we have in our pipes Not only we having lead in paint, but also lead in pipes. And from there, I'll let Ramon take it on.
So just building on top of what Alexis was talking about, I'm the organizer for the Junction Coalition. And basically what I do is I go out into the community, knocking on doors and finding out what community folks are thinking and feeling about their community. And so with this environmental justice challenges for Toledo is, as Alexis described, then you go to, well, you know, has the community had the opportunity to vote or have a say in the development, implementation, or enforcement of these environmental challenges? No, historically, no. I mean, it's been designed to make decisions about community water consumers not having a voice in the process. So in the process, and I'm talking about the laws, regulations, policies. So we've essentially been, kept out of that whole process, I think by design, because this is a commercial entity. And so if it's a money-making entity, then, you want to make sure that, to some degree that or a large degree that marginalized communities, pay and not have any voice in any of this whole process that I just described. So that's, to me, the biggest challenge is to build a community voice to have, to be at the table. And as a matter of fact, bring the table. We bring our own table and chairs. So that's been a big challenge is to get ourselves at that place.
So it sounds like it's a combination of a couple things. Or groups like yours are reaching out to the community and listening to what they feel and experience as water problems, as environmental problems. But then they might not also be aware of some things that are a problem out there that could be a threat to their health or a threat to their water, right? So there's probably some two-way education happening also. Is that fair to say?
I would 100% agree. As I know, one of Alicia's favorite things to say is a lot of times in these impacted communities, it's not so much a poverty of dollars, but it's a poverty of information. And when we talk about, one, what's driving the cost up of our water rates, and, why is it that families are having these bills that are $2,000, $3,000 and they're on a fixed income, or they're at a minimum wage job, or, they just, water is to a point where it is exceeding the average cost that an individual should be having to pay out. There needs to be education to the community, and not just to, and what we're finding too, not just to the community, but also to our local officials and the utilities, making sure that, one, we know who we can go and talk to, who we need to go and where do we need to go to get resources and information and support. Is there funding opportunities to help relieve some of these cost burdens? And then on the other side, when we're talking about lead service line replacements, is there a way for people to, if they've got a leak in their pipes, and people need to, in order to get that repaired, they have to shut their water off. Is there engagement with that family? And making sure that there's if they need bottled water, they're getting bottled water. If they need information on how to properly flush their pipes, and knowing that they shouldn't boil their water, but they should actually just be flushing. Is there information about whether or not they have filters and know how to install those filters? So yes, that information is definitely twofold, and that we educate our communities on the impacts, what resources are available to them, and who do they need to talk to raise these concerns. And then on the other side, with our utilities, how do you properly engage the community ahead of time, and not just in crises mode? How are we being proactive in our messaging? And is that messaging distributed in an equitable manner, not just putting it on your website or putting it, on social media, but understanding these communities that you service are very mixed. You know, some of them have access to internet and some don't. Some rely heavily on local news and newspapers and bulletins still. So it's definitely twofold in how we, create a process that is equitable, and then also pushing our not utilities, but our city officials to kind of ask for state help and federal help as we look at the impacts of these factory farms and things that's coming downstream. I mean, these communities are impacted enough by things on the ground, and having, downstream impacts built on top of that is something that our city and our state should be working to, one, understand, but two, push back on.
Yeah. Ramon, what's it like when you go door to door? What are those conversations like, as far, and especially in respect to this kind of two-way conversation?
Yeah, excellent question. Just to piggyback on what Alexis was saying, as an organizer, we've learned that institutions like this, the Department of Public Utilities here in Toledo, they're not designed to provide information or education to the community. They're designed to send you a bill, pay it, and if you don't pay it, and if you're not able to pay it, then we're going to shut your water off, and that's what they do, regardless. If you have children in the home, if you're a senior citizen, if you have a disability, there really is no there is no structure built into these institutions that provide information or education. So that's why, as a community organizer, when I'm going out door knocking and talking to folks regarding the water company that was increasing the water rate, people were like, "What? Why is that? When did that happen?" And that's why my water bill is so high now. So we end up having to turn around and go back to this institution and let them know that we know that you're not designed to do community education, public education around these issues. So we're going to put ourselves at this table, and then we're going to start designing our own voice into that institution. And so through that process, we've been able to get folks from the community who are fired up enough and saying, you know what, I want to be a voice at that table too. So we've been very successful in doing the door-to-door knocking, hearing their issues and concerns, and then recruiting them to get on this water affordability and consumer protection committee so that they can actually have a voice. And in the beginning, it was a challenge because, they're not accustomed to having folks come in and talk about, their issues, concerns, and information that's needed to go out into the community. But we basically just push our way in there, and we created ordinances that were going to be a part of legislation that gives water consumers the right to be able to talk about what needs to change, what needs to happen, so that water is affordable, so that it is clean and that it's safe, and not only just responding to the symptoms of those high rates, but also talking about the root causes. Why are we paying all these increases, and why is our water contaminated? And so then we have to look at some of the root causes that Alexis was talking about. The CAFOs that are downstream that are polluting the water. So these are the kinds of conversations that come up when you're out door knocking and talking to people. You're letting them know that you do actually have a voice. You can actually make inroads and make a difference. And so we've started to do that, and we still have a ways to go, but we've now are part of we're at the decision making table.
So it sounds like there's been a kind of like a real uptick in your effort over the past couple years, right? Like the algal bloom thing happened back in 2014, but it sounds like to me that like the past just couple years here, you've really ramped up outreach in the area and trying to get the community involved and also get the water providers and others involved. Is that right? There's kind of this momentum going on.
That is definitely correct. for the past couple of years, it has been paramount to get community voice. Is why the Freshwater Future works with the water councils throughout the region. Toledo Community Water Council took place because the voices of the community were not being heard. Prior to the task force working in tandem with all of the institutions and stakeholders, it was the community that was in harm's way. So we started out in 2014 with the algal blooms in Toledo, hepatitis A outbreaks in Detroit, children dying in Flint due to lead exposure. A number of things that led and said, community said, enough is enough. So to have these water councils working in tandem with these institutions, with these municipalities, is going to be the healing space, the restorative space. And so, yes, it has been here recently where we realize and understand that water is the new gold. It is the one thing that we have to have in order to live. So why aren't we looking at water access, security, and democracy as the lead for all spaces of equity? So yes, it has been a tremendous microscope, magnifying glass on issues of water, particularly in low to moderate income areas, and what and how we can lift those issues up at a federal space, state space, and local space with our officials, our public servants, those that are supposed to be serving the public.
I know Ramon mentioned some of the specific efforts that have happened recently, and you've said that all this is going on. I'm curious, do you feel like you're getting any traction? Have you seen any results or outcomes, or maybe it hasn't been an actual change in the water itself yet, but are some of those, government entities and water providers and others starting to listen? Are there relationships starting to form? How's it all going?
I would say yes, and I would ask Alexis to support me in this response. Not only are they listening and responding, but the community is now making demands, having legal support with organizations like ABLE, Fair Housing, our Congresswoman Captor and Congresswoman Tlaib, Stovanet, a number of Congress folks at the federal level are implementing legislation that protects. And looking at it from an interconnection space. It's not just water, but it's housing. It's not just water, but it's transportation. Working with our policy folks over at Freshwater Future, we're able to look at each and every Great Lakes space and nationally. We just were on a call with the Community Water Center out in California. These are all issues that are definitely coming to the forefront. Senator Brown working on some topics and areas, and just making sure that we can lift it up from a federal space for legislation. But there's also funding from the federal EPA. Right now in Toledo, our director of public utilities is working with the Toledo Water Council and Junction Coalition and Freshwater Future to actually host artificial intelligence with blue conduit to actually understand where the lead lines need to be replaced. And that was funded by the federal EPA. So I would say, yes, they're definitely hearing, but they're also hearing at a local level that is spanning between the local, state, and federal as our governor is preparing to host a conversation with downstream communities around the issue of algal bloom.
Other thoughts from Ramon or Alexis on how things are actually going? What's starting to materialize as a result of all your, knocking on doors and getting people around to tables to talk and putting education out there? Are you seeing any signs of traction?
Yeah, absolutely. I had mentioned earlier that the Toledo Community Water Council, established themselves formally with the Department of Public Utilities and formed the Water Affordability and Consumer Protection Committee. And that's the vehicle for the community to be able to drive, the issues, concerns, and the demands for improvements in safe, clean, affordable drinking water. And so, we've been able to establish the rental landlord-tenant agreement so that no one, whether you're a tenant, will have your water shut off, because sometimes landlords are not being responsible and paying for the tenants' water, and so the tenants now have a vehicle they can use to make sure that their water is not turned off, and actually have the water account put in the tenant's name so that they have control over that. We've also started to implement a water affordability plan, which is starting now. So hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have a water affordability plan. So everyone will be able to afford water, even though it is a human right. You still have to pay for it, and so we want to make sure that folks are able to afford to pay for that, for their water. And we are working on emergency assistance, so that way folks who are having a challenge in paying their bills, that there's a way that they can start to reduce their large water balance. Not because people don't want to pay their water, it's because economically it's a big challenge, especially if you're living in marginalized urban neighborhoods where it's almost like designed so that folks remain in marginalized communities because of the overarching neglect in terms of laws, policies, and regulations that keep folks marginalized. So, those are all things that are overarching that are creating, these types of disparities in the community. So we've been able to, have community folks to be able to challenge those and starting to overcome them. We still have a ways to go, but we certainly are in a much better position now to make sure that those issues are being addressed, not only in the short term but in the long term. So community organizing really is one of the foundations to build community voice and community power to address these policies, legislations, and regulations that are keeping folks oppressed.
I was curious. You mentioned some other communities around the region there, and I wanted to hear a little bit more about how the challenges facing people in Toledo and the approach to the work, right, of outreach and mobilizing and advocating, how that's reflective of things in other communities around the Great Lakes and the approach of Freshwater Future.
And excuse me, I have my niece here with me, so she, might jump in at any point to add her perspective.
Hey, we need the voices of young people too. It's let them talk.
But I would say, so when we look at Detroit, for example, Flint, Benton Harbor, Pellston, these are all communities that, and mostly Michigan, but also Chicago, where we've traditionally, I think, around these environmental issues and water issues have had this top-down approach. When we look at how Freshwater Future seeks to engage the community, it's not Freshwater Future telling these communities how they need to operate, how they should do anything. It's us asking the community, what is it that they see as their concerns? What is, what are they seeing on the ground? And how can we be of use to them? It's them really guiding and being at the center of these conversations, not just informing, but also being the ones to put pen to paper and, offer up the principles of what needs to change as we shift from a top-down approach to a community upward approach. You look at Detroit as they have their 10 must-haves for water affordability. When you look at Flint and their experience with lead contamination and what it's like to recover after that, what got them to that point, and what they've been working on to make sure it doesn't happen again. When we look at Benton Harbor, where you've got citizens and residents being the ones going door to door, with citizens and residents being the ones making sure that the information is not only given, but is put in a language that they know community will understand. Because that's another part of it, is a lot of times when we have these environmental groups, they're coming in and they've got all this jargon and environmental things, and it's not translated in a way that community can grasp onto it, community can take it and run with it and inform conversations. What we've done, and we built a network across the Great Lakes, and what we're working on is having Toledoans talk with Detroiters, talk with Flint natives, talk with Benton Harbor members, and create a network of just residents having a voice around these issues. And we call it All About Water because it's all about, what's happening with our water, as we recognize it as a human right, but also our indigenous people informing us and telling us that it's not just a human right, but we need to look at water as a partner. And when we look at it as a partner, we tend to protect it better. We tend to put it in the forefront and have more of a holistic approach into, our plans moving forward. We aren't just looking at what can I do with this resource and how can it benefit me, but what do I need to do to make sure that this resource is plentiful and healthy and clean. So we're learning from each other. These different communities are facing a lot of the same issues. And so to see what has worked in Detroit versus what's working in Toledo, letting us build off of each other builds that people power that democracy really was meant for. And then we get into these rooms and we build a platform. And I really love a term that Ramon uses. He says a people's executive order. We're building that people's executive order, and we're going into the rooms with our legislators and telling them, I know you have an agenda, but this is what your constituents are wanting to see. These are the things that are important to us.
Love that. That's awesome stuff. I wanted to kind of conclude by asking about, I guess, the ultimate vision, right? And that's having environmental justice, water justice for everybody, that water equity. And I'd especially love to kind of hear Alicia's thoughts on what equity and justice when it comes to water, what does that look like?
Equity and justice as it relates to water looks as such as in a way to which the community, the people, are dictating, providing, and supporting the change. Where local municipalities are sitting down in rooms with their residents saying what is happening. We have a mantra, nothing about us without us. And our community organizer going out, gathering the people, hosting Zooms during this pandemic with the community and having those conversations. That's where the equality comes in. The level playing field comes in that space. When you start about justice, you're not looking at just us. You're looking at the entire process of what is happening. When we start talking about indigenous people, those of different racial and ethnic backgrounds, we need to have those individuals at the table. So there needs to be a deconstruction of the table that was already there. Destroy it and set a new table. Build a new table that has no historic systematic harm. There is a voice for everyone, an opportunity for everyone. Any stakeholder that claims to be service to the community, then they should be sitting at that table. There should be mandates for equality, mandates that are set by with the people through community benefit agreements, working with organizations throughout the region and around the country to identify what is the language we will use. How will we use that language? Having bilingual documents, not just documents in English, because we're not a country of just English-speaking residents. Begin to look at who we are serving. That is the equity, that is the inclusion, that is the diversity that is needed in our country right now as we are looking to put water in a space that it should be. And that's water is for each and every individual walking our planet. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak to that.
Yeah, I think what'll stick in my head is nothing about us without us. That's awesome. Well, Alexis, Alicia, Ramon, I know that we could keep going and talking about a lot that's going on in there in Toledo and the other communities you're working in. But this was a great overview that I look forward to sharing with people. Hopefully that the efforts you're taking and the progress you're making inspire others and can provide a path for them to follow. Because like I said, this is happening in a lot of communities across the country, and the time is now. But thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
Thank
You got
you.
it, Travis. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Travis.
Waterloop.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to today's episode. A special thanks to Waterloop supporters Spring Point Partners and the Walton Family Foundation. The Waterloop podcast is sponsored by High Sierra Showerheads, the smart, stylish way to save energy, water, and money while enjoying a powerful shower. Save 20% with promo code WATERLOOP at highsierrashowerheads.com. Waterloop is also sponsored by Flume, the smart water monitor that tracks your home's water use in real time and provides data on your smartphone. Save 10% with promo code WATERLOOP at flumewater.com. If you like Waterloop, please subscribe to the YouTube channel or your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on social media and visit waterloop.org to sign up for updates.
Waterloop, Waterloop, Waterloop.